To those of you watching on YouTube, the recording's just started. I've had a bit of chat with everyone to welcome them here, but for those of you that have just joined live anyway, please do feel free to talk to me in the chat. You're all helping each other out with tech issues, which I really appreciate because I cannot stop and do all of these at the same time. So today we're talking about grief, loss, and acceptance. This is a subject really close to my heart at the moment. I'm talking to lots of our customers and lots of my private clients as well about the grief and loss that we're dealing with at the moment. I want to be really clear from the outset here. Every single one of your experiences of what you've lost throughout this pandemic is valid. One thing I'm hearing so much is this comparison of who's had it worse, who's had more loss. Whatever it might be, I want to get rid of those comparisons for this session. Engage in this as yourself personally, thinking about the losses you've had. Please do speak to me in the chat, ask me questions, make comments, give your reactions to the things I'm saying. You can also send questions to me in the chat privately. I'll pick those up and respond to them, but I won't read out your name so that you can ask those things that are a bit more personal. For those of you that don't know who I am or don't know who the company is, somehow you found this link and you want to speak to us, fantastic. So CiC, we're an employee assistance program based in London, but as you can see from the chat, we've got people from all over the world listening and joining in. My name is Harry. I work as a psychotherapist and a counsellor, but I also run the specialist service department at CiC. So I do a lot of work with our customers across the globe, looking at these kind of things that are happening in the moment, kind of zeitgeist ideas. And of course, one of them throughout the pandemic is this idea of grief and loss. So to start us off, and like I say, your interaction in these sessions is far more important than the things I have to say. So I want to hear your questions. I want to hear your experiences of loss. I want you to share with me and the rest of the group what you've been going through, because we can also feel so alone with this loss at the moment. So this pandemic has caused a significant period of loss. That's not going to come as a surprise to any of us. But what have we lost? Of course, the first thing we think about is lives. We think about death and the people that we've lost, our loved ones, strangers, people on other sides of the world that we're feeling the loss of. This is a kind of collective grief, which can be really, really difficult and new for so many of us. If you live in my part of the world, in the UK, the last period of collective grief we had probably, I don't know, we had a couple of terrorist attacks that brought that on, I guess, but they were much smaller scale than this. Maybe the last period of such large collective grief we had was the Second World War happening on our soil, things like that. So it can be quite a while since a nation or a community has felt this. But we're also experiencing the loss of other things, normalcy, the loss of our normal lives, relationships. Let me know in the chat if there's anything you think you've lost that I haven't got here. We might be losing opportunities, freedoms. Someone said in the chat here, some people have lost their health, which has deteriorated, mental or physical. Absolutely. It's a really good one. I hadn't thought of that one. Jobs, a couple of people saying jobs. Yeah, of course. I'd kind of put that under the normalcy, if our job was part of our normal life. Yeah, Daniel's saying freedom of movement. Yeah, really good one. That opportunity to be who I want to be and go where I want to go. That power. If you remember, one of these first presentations we did was on this theme of the pandemic and powerlessness, how we experience the mental health issues we're having so much more intensely because we don't feel like we have the control over it. We don't have the power we need to solve the problems. Steph said here something really heartbreaking, the chance to see my dad before he passed away. And that's that second point here. Thank you for sharing that, Steph. That's that second point here. We've also lost some of the ability to grieve these losses as we usually would. No matter where you are in the world, there is some tradition around grief and loss that we follow, some ritual, some process that we go through. Here in the UK, it's funerals or cremations or, gathering together for a celebration of life. People coming together and finding that important acceptance and understanding of a loss as a group. Instead, we're all left doing this on our own individually. Someone else saying in the chat, same with me, was not able to see my dad before he passed away. Someone else saying, our idea of the future that has no fear, the threat of the pandemic has now been added into the fear of climate change and what our future may look like. Yes, for some of us, the fear and the loss we're feeling will be that loss of opportunity, that loss of a normal life that we thought we were leaving, but now all of our plans for the future and our thoughts about the future have changed. We are far more likely at the moment to be catastrophizing. And when I say catastrophizing, I mean taking any bit of information we have, leaping ahead into the future and thinking, what is the worst that can happen? And the problem with that is we start feeling as if the worst is right around the corner in the present. We feel all those physical symptoms. A couple of people agreeing with you, saying to me privately, I agree with this. Yeah. Amanda saying, I lost my dad too to COVID and couldn't say goodbye. This whole idea of us being kind of lost in our grief. Yeah. Someone else saying, will we find a new normal? What is this? Well, I don't think we're going to know until we find it. I don't think we'll have any idea of what the new normal will look like until we're in it and until it feels normal, until it feels normal for all of us. We're not all going to come back to normal at the same pace. We have to understand that we're all slightly different. Someone's saying loss of choices and being spontaneous. Yeah, loss of excitement in our life. I'm in my bedroom. I've been in my bedroom since I first started doing these presentations. I'd like to see other parts of the world. Yeah. Jane's saying spontaneity, definitely. And look, like I said, many of us have not experienced collective grief on this scale. So we might be feeling grief in a way that we've never felt it before. And that's totally understandable. I want to talk to you a bit about the stages of grief. Every sitcom I've ever seen has an episode about the stages of grief, where someone goes through denial, anger, bargaining, sadness, and acceptance. It doesn't work like that in real life, particularly now. These are not linear. I can be angry one day, sad that afternoon, angry again in the evening, and then back to bargaining on a Wednesday. It doesn't matter. These things will be jumped around. And we might also get stuck in one or two of these stages for a bit longer than we normally would. I think it's really important that we give ourselves a bit of a break around this. I put a few lines around there about the stages of grief and trying to relate them to the pandemic. But what we're always trying to reach with grief, and by the way, what I mean here is grieving the loss of someone we love, grieving the losses of people that we don't know about. We could be grieving those losses of freedoms, that loss of spontaneity. Every single loss we're feeling at the moment should be valid. Daniel's saying in the chat, my family hasn't met my daughter, 1 year old now, as they're back in the States. Yeah, missing out on life events, missing out on my parents meeting a child before it's a year old. Yeah, wow, they've missed out on quite a lot. Clive saying, haven't met family in Africa for 18 months and counting due to travel restrictions. So many people that I'm coming across are struggling, working at home, working 12, 14-hour days sometimes, because they've got nothing else to pour their time into, because usually they would have been with their family once or twice. Yeah, they're really missing out on that sense of normalcy and seeing people. So as I was saying, what we're trying to get towards with grief, whatever the loss is this feeling of acceptance, of thinking, okay, this is happening, I need to figure out what to do next. Like I said on the previous slide, it's usually our rituals around loss and death that help us find this acceptance. We find the acceptance with other people. It's kind of what we're attempting to do with this session today, by just having an open conversation about the loss and hearing other people going through something similar. That can help us find that understanding and acceptance. Someone said to me here privately, some people are not aware of their loss and not aware they are even suffering from grief. They can be angry and sad but not know why. How can we help them realize the issue and accept it? That's a really beautiful comment. Yeah, just because I'm in these stages doesn't necessarily mean I understand that I'm doing it because I'm in grief. I think the best way we can help people at the moment is just by creating good spaces to have conversations. Again, what I'm attempting to do here, just creating a space where people don't feel judged, they feel valued in their conversation around grief, and just get people to start talking about how they're feeling. Whether it's grief, stress, anxiety, depression, whatever it is at the moment, we need places to talk about it. This is one of the things that we've really lost with working at home. I wouldn't necessarily talk with all of my colleagues about the grief I'm going through, but they'd likely know what's going on for me. We'd have some sort of communication around it and some sort of change in the way we talk about it, and that would be quite useful. We're not having that at the moment. That can be really, really difficult for us. So yeah, just creating spaces where people can talk about their mental health, I think, is the most vital way of doing it at the moment. Oh, there's someone else in the chat who can't hear, so they'll have to rejoin, unfortunately. I'll do that same message again. There we go. Yeah, people talking about the loss that they've experienced here. I lost my dad in May 19 whilst I was out of the country, and then 2 months later lost my home. Then COVID arrived and I was struggling to work from home and not seeing anyone. Then through COVID, I've lost 5 friends. It's been a difficult time. Gosh, that's a lot I'm really pleased that you were able to share that there with people. Share it with the group as well, because that is a huge amount of loss. I also want to bring up that subject of comparison of loss again, because we just heard someone who's been through a lot of loss recently, right? And so what our first instinct sometimes then is to think, well, I can't be grieving. I've only lost one person. This person's lost loads. We need to get rid of that comparison, because those comparisons aren't useful. I hear it all the time at the moment, but my response is always the same. If you find yourself making a comparison, check, is this comparison useful for me, or is it hurtful to me? Because if I'm comparing myself to other people, what good does that do? What, I don't look after myself, I don't allow myself to grieve because someone over there should be grieving more than me. Me not grieving doesn't help them at all. In fact, if I do grieve, if I do go through the process, if I do share my experience, I might be able to help them as well. Someone else saying in chat, yeah, I haven't seen my mum in person since 2019. She's in Tenerife. Video calls are not the same. Someone else saying, I've lost a family member, but it wasn't to COVID. Is the presentation really COVID focused? No, we're talking about loss and acceptance and grief in general. We're talking about it in the context of the pandemic, sure. But any loss that you've had might not have been due to COVID, but if it's during the pandemic, it's changed the way that we're grieving. Losing my grandfather at the age of 15 to suicide, my family had no idea of her struggling, granddaughter, sorry, no idea of her struggling mental health situation. Feeling like I've been hit by a tornado and lifted out of my normal life into a nightmare. That's a really common experience I'm hearing with grief at the moment. It feels kind of unreal. I think that's some of those kind of bargaining feelings as well, and that denial. It's just like it really doesn't feel real. It will take some time. The grief that we're feeling at the moment, particularly if it's a traumatic grief like that, it's going to stay. It's going to stay for a long time. I had a student say to me in the first lockdown that they are grieving all the lost opportunities, incidentals. Yeah, guys, keep these coming. I'm not going to be able to read out all of them, but thank you so much. So yeah, this idea of getting towards acceptance and this meaning, which is this additional stage that we've added into grief. For some of us, especially if the grief has felt worse than it should have done, the meaning might not come until the pandemic has paused. Someone asked earlier about, when is this new normal? What's it going to look like? We won't know till we're in it, and we won't know until the pandemic has passed. We might also be feeling this anticipatory grief. Like I said at the beginning, we don't have to have experienced a tangible loss to be feeling some grief at the moment. Anticipatory grief is the feeling I get when the future feels really uncertain. And with the pandemic, this kind of grief is confusing. We normally only see this kind of anticipatory grief in war zones and areas of conflict. So what's happened is our sense of danger is really heightened, and our sense of safety has been broken. So we're feeling that loss of safety, we're grieving that loss of normalcy. And what happens is our fight or flight reaction gets triggered. We get stuck inside. We might experience some agoraphobia, not wanting to be around other people as well. We've been told that the world outside is dangerous. Someone said here privately, is it normal to feel numb from all the chaos that's happening around us? Or am I just covering up grief by numbing my emotions? No, it's perfectly natural to feel numb at the moment. We are being bombarded by really difficult news, difficult stories in our personal life, difficult things that we're doing at work. That numbness is just self-preservation. It's just us protecting ourselves, and it's perfectly natural. If we're not ready to process the grief, if we're not ready to process the chaos, we will stay numb for a little while. And that's kind of positive at the moment, because the opposite is feeling this unhealthy anticipatory grief, this anxiety, the fight or flight, that fear and scared and anxious all the time. Yeah. Someone's saying here to me privately, I lost my mum this year and I feel a lost sense of myself and who I am. I feel I have lost 50% of myself. Yeah. Someone else saying privately, because we heard a lot of news around someone's passing, whether it's a relative or a friend, sometimes we also fear and at the same time sadness, especially if your loved ones are living far away from you. Yeah, we're stuck, we're stilted. And then all of that fear adds to this anticipatory grief. So not only are we feeling the fight or flight response, we're feeling it at a time where we've got nothing to fight or run away from. I can't punch the pandemic. I can't run away from it. I'm stuck in it. Again, we come back to that powerlessness again. Jeff saying in the chat here, I feel like my support network has been dragged away and it's slipping through my fingers. Well, first of all, the language you use there is beautifully poetic, but I just want to make sure, none of this is your fault. Your support network has been taken away from you but those members in your support network have had you taken away from them as well. It's an equal taking apart in all places. And this slipping through your fingers, you haven't done anything wrong. It's not like you haven't held it properly enough. Take that feeling as information. That feeling of your support network going away from you is information that you need to spend some time rebuilding it. We have to be proactive in these things at the moment. The natural ways that these support networks looked after us just aren't there at the moment. Someone's saying here, I'm doing so bad because the pandemic took all my coping mechanisms from me. Yeah, so the same kind of thing. Those things that we used to do that made us feel well. There's this quote I've been sharing in a lot of my presentations. I actually think I took it out of this one because I've put it in so many of them, but we need to remember we're created creative. We need to remember it's the new things we're going to do in this new time that will get us through it. So if your old coping mechanisms are gone, that's because we're living in a new time where those coping mechanisms aren't possible. So we might have to work quite hard, but maybe see if we can come up with other ones. Why don't you guys let me know in the chat what your coping mechanisms are? What healthy things you found that you can do that allow you to forget about all the problems going on? Because I guarantee you, you'll share one and someone else will pick it up and go and give it a go. That's where I get most of my ideas at the moment. Yashin shouting, gym. Yeah, really good. Yeah, that kind of physical exercise can really help it. Someone else saying, I can only confirm it. I lost my grandfather at the age of 8. He was like a father to me, and I still have problems with people bonding with people today. Yeah, it can be really hard to learn how to be with other people, learn how to trust other people after we've had such a significant loss. Someone else saying, I lost my wife for 30 years, 6 weeks ago to cancer. She was 51, almost impossible to keep going. I'm really pleased that you could come today, and hopefully you can find some of that understanding. Lindsay saying, I recently lost someone who was a huge part of my life. Since their passing, I've kept going, working and planning the funeral. I'm scared of when I stop, the overwhelming feeling of loss might come, as I have to come to terms with what has occurred. Don't fear that feeling. It's natural. You will be hurt by this. These things are supposed to hurt us. But remember, we're not trying to forget about these people and move on. We're trying to find a new way of living with them not being in the world anymore. That's the way that I like to look at grief. It's going to be new, it's going to be different, but it's going to be something that we have to do while we're looking after ourselves, basically. So what ideas have people got? Gyms, walking with the dog, reading and swimming, fresh air, fishing, sailing, golf. That's someone who lives by the sea. Walking in the forest. Comforting other people in similar situations. Yeah, really good. Going for a walk. Stopped watching the news, someone saying. Yeah, best decision ever. Clive saying, I think it's useful to stop and reflect on what we've lost, both big and small. Sometimes we don't realise what we've lost. Even with the loss of a loved one, it's good to consider what that person's death has taken from us. I've lost a niece, but along with the grief of her passing, we have also lost her presence at family gatherings. We've lost the hopes we had for that person. Yeah, there's many aspects of loss which is worth reflecting on and talking about. I agree wholeheartedly. That's brilliant. Someone else has asked me a question here. I can't really read that one. Oh, there we are. I'm still getting used to using all these online programs, even though it's all I've been doing for the past 14 months, apparently. Okay, volunteering. I telephoned befriending a couple of elderly people during lockdown. I recently met both of them and it was lovely, beautiful. I try to walk my dog as balanced. There's some great ideas. Keep them coming in the chat and keep your questions coming. I'll try and get to as many of them as I can. So as well as this anticipatory grief and regular grief, what are we trying to do? So we're trying to not force away the negative thoughts. Sometimes if we are doing that forcing away or that numbness that one of you talked about, that's very natural. It's just our mind being protective of a really difficult feeling. Instead, aim for balance in what you're thinking. Aim to think, when you think of the real negative about the loss, try and find some of the positives that you remember about that person in their life. Anticipatory grief, if you're feeling that general sense of sadness and fear, anticipatory grief is based in the future and our imagination of what is the worst that can happen. So trying to come back to the present, any of those tools and tips that you have, and I'm going to share a breathing exercise and some of those things, they're things that I've shared before. I will share them again. There is nothing new, but anything we can do to come back to the present can help us with any of that anxiety, by any of that worry. Sometimes I just like to do a breathing exercise and name the physical objects around me. I do this with clients on phone calls or on Zoom calls when we're having our sessions at the moment. If I notice that I'm getting anxious or they're getting really anxious, we'll just do a little process where we name what's in the room around them. It really brings us back and grounds us. I'm doing it now in my head: a suitcase, a guitar, a TV screen, some pictures, a light, another computer screen, my phone. All of a sudden, I have to be in the present if I'm naming those things around me. And then I realized when I'm in the present moment, some of the negative things that I thought were going to happen, some of those catastrophizing thoughts I had, haven't happened. And then I can focus on what I can control in the present. Remember, a lot of what's made worse for us throughout the pandemic is because we feel so powerless to do anything about it. We've had our power taken away from us. Someone's asked me here privately, I lost 3 family members in the space of 3 months at the start of the year. How do you help partners or children whilst trying to grieve yourself? Well, we need both things. So we need space to grieve on our own, and we also need space to grieve with others. So the first thing I do is I make that explicit. It is not your job to make sure that everyone grieves okay, but you can share that concern with your family. So with your partner and your children, sit down and say, look, I want to make sure that we're all having the conversations we need to have around this grief, around this loss we're dealing with, but I can't be in charge of it all because I need to grieve myself. So what do you need? And just start a conversation around listening to what everyone thinks they need, and then you can see if you can fulfill that need amongst yourselves. Share the load. We find so often the load of a significant loss, the grief falls on one person, and that's not fair. We need to share this out, particularly now. Bridget's been baking cakes. I have everything under control. What I want to bake, I do. Yeah, that's a really good way of bringing that power back to our mind. I've talked about thankfulness as well as being honest about pain and grief being experienced. Yeah, kind of what I was saying there. It's really good to just be honest about the feelings that are in the room. Someone's asked, will the PowerPoint be available later? Yes, I'll give a copy of these slides out when I download a list of everyone who's attended, and you'll get a copy of the slides and a link to the recording in a couple of days. So this is acceptance. This is the power. This is what we're looking for in the present. Acceptance is where the power lies. We find control is acceptance because we're looking at what we can do rather than what we cannot. So rather than me sitting here panicking and getting anxious about going back to the office, getting back on the tube, seeing people again, going to family gatherings again, I'm not doing any of those today. What I'm doing today is staying safe in my home, going on a little bit of a trip later, where I need to wash my hands, keep a safe distance, where I need to learn and adapt. And this allows that animal part of our brain to relax a little bit. And it allows me really to switch off from that fight or flight response that's so unhelpful at the moment. I've had someone saying to me privately, my relationship broke down after 30 years and struggled and found counseling is helping me. But I'm glad that you're finding a space to talk. That's really, really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And I'm sorry to hear about your relationships. So many relationships have been put under strain or broken under this pandemic. Someone else saying privately, it's natural to run away from grief. Yes, it very much is. It's natural to run away from grief to enable us to assess the situation, but it would help in the acceptance process if we face such feelings squarely, be positive and move forwards, need to find a good reason for everything happening around us. Well, yeah, that's kind of what I mean by balance. There's going to be good and bad in every loss, I think. Yeah. Caroline's saying, I've started a gratitude diary and I list 5 things a day that I am grateful for. It has really helped me through caring for my grieving mum. Highly recommend it, even if it helps you sleep better. Anything that helps you sleep better at the moment is definitely positive. Sleep is one of the things that we're mainly struggling with throughout the pandemic. Someone saying deepening my spiritual life has helped out. I lost 3 family members in the past 6 months. Wow, that's really tough due to COVID. So yeah, the spiritual connection we have with our friends, our family members, with the world, with our gods, if we have them, can really help us to understand the situation and come to that acceptance. Lots of people saying you had a great idea, Caroline. Gosh, lots of good comments in the chat. Someone said privately, I think in the current time, not only losses are a thing that people strongly burdened by, but also that they're more and more isolated. Yes, you're absolutely right. This is what I was saying at the top of the session. We're separated from our usual process of grieving and work more and more because you're at home and no longer have a clear structure. We're going to talk about that in a bit. And so you lose yourself more and more. I see that so that a balance is a must in this time to not slip into depression. Yeah, good point. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. So yeah, I want to talk about what lockdown's done, what lockdown has made us do. Living like we have been has made staying positive far more difficult. I really like this picture because it looks like a lot of the nights or days I've had over the past few months, just thinking, well, when can I get back out there? but we're spending less time outside in nature. We're missing out on the social aspects of life. The things that worked for us in spring or summer last year might not feel possible. Remember, feeling lonely. If you're feeling lonely at the moment, then that is completely natural. But you might need to schedule calls with friends and family, make goals with things to look forward to. The best thing that you can do for yourself right now is to get into good habits of caring for yourself. If you get into good habits of doing it now, as things open up, as things become less locked down, you'll be more able to look after them, look after yourself. And we need some space for mental health. We need to set ourselves up in a positive frame of mind first thing in the morning. And sometimes that means attending to our needs. When I get up in the morning and I don't want to go to work, I need to look after myself first. I don't wake up every morning raring to go and can't wait to do these presentations. Sometimes I want to stay in bed and hide from the world. That means I need to care for myself before I go and do stuff for other people. And that involves healthily venting my negative feelings, my worries, my stresses, my anxiety, my grief. If I can get them out of my system, I can move forward. If I can express them, this is why I talk about finding spaces where you can talk about these things. If I can express them, then I can do something about it. It's in front of me. I can share it with someone. I can get rid of it if it's a useless feeling. I can look at it from other angles if I need to find some meaning in it. Someone here said privately, struggling to get back to normal and socializing as restrictions relax. Feels daft as I've been waiting for the end of lockdown. You are absolutely not alone in that if you're feeling that. Give me some thumbs up if you're also feeling a bit nervous about going back to socializing. If you're not quite sure what's coming next. This is totally natural for us at the moment. It's that psychological push-pull. I can't wait to resume my normal routine, but it also scares me a little bit. Yeah, I can see lots of thumbs up coming up in the chat at the moment, in the bottom left. So lots of people agreeing with you there. Speak to your friends about it. Speak to the people that you would be socializing with and say, hey, I'm really looking forward to this, but I'm going to need a little time getting used to it. You might want to practice going to the pub, but not going in, walk there or get the bus or practice your journey to work, practice your commute before you have to do it on a daily basis again. Take things at your own pace. Someone else saying privately, I feel like I've developed social anxiety since being in lockdown and suffering various things, divorce, death, and moving, finding myself isolating myself and drawing away from others. Again, that's a really natural thing. Human beings, when we feel like we're not doing well, we withdraw, we go and hide from other people. We don't want people to see that we're not doing well. It's just a kind of self-preservation technique. So make sure that you're sharing where possible with friends and family members. That social anxiety, all the studies that they've done about this, by the way, show that the social anxiety usually lifts quite easily for people once they start getting back into a routine of doing things with other people. We just haven't been used to it for a long time. It's like it's a muscle we haven't worked out. Someone else saying here, because we heard a lot of news about someone's passing, the best thing to do for now is to appreciate what you have right now and tell your loved ones you love them. Yes, yeah. It can be a nice reminder to appreciate and respect the things we've got. Steph saying, what is this socializing thing? Yeah, good one, Steph. Thank you. Sarah saying, it's so important to be able to vent feelings with family and friends, but I feel that I'm always being negative. But I'm destroying my own desk at the moment, so negativity is probably valid. No, I think it's really important that we share those negative thoughts. I think sometimes negative sounds so much louder than positive, and if you're usually a positive person, it can be quite hard to vent your negative feelings. So just try to find balance as well. Maybe do a bit of preparation before you speak to friends and family about these kind of things and think, okay, I want to say this negative thing because I need it vented, but here's also some positive that I can bring to it as well. There is this kind of trend of toxic positivity as well, this idea that we have to be positive and ready to do anything and happy about everything. It's not true. We're living through a dark, dangerous, scary, death-filled time, and I think we need to be quite honest about that sometimes. It can't always be perfect and comfortable and relaxing and natural and happy, no matter how much we want it to be. Oh yeah, Joanna saying my cats are great listeners. Yeah, I think a lot of people have started to speak to their pets a little bit more. And then rest. I'm going to come back to my slides. You guys keep the questions coming. Thank you. Can we break these bigger problems down into smaller ones and deal with them a bit at a time as well? For those of you that have been to my presentations recently, you'll have seen this slide. I call it the most boring slide I've ever written, but I like it. I've tried to make it look better, but I can't. But what I do know is I can more easily care for myself when I have a routine. I can develop positive habits that help me on a daily basis get better and better. Think about the routines you've lost since working remotely. I can see so many of you in your homes. I see a few people in their offices though. Things are starting to change. So what routines have you lost recently? Do you have a clear routine in your mind? This start time, end time, breaks, meals, and exercise. Really, really important for us. Think back. Think back to when you were commuting to an office every day. Did you sometimes arrive at the office and you had no idea how you got there? I don't know, maybe you'd been on a train or a bus or in a car or walking. Our brain was so comfortable and relaxed with our surroundings that we didn't have to worry about what was coming next. That's why, yeah, Lindsay said all the time, yeah. So this is really common for us. When we feel like we have this routine, our brain switches off all the panic and worry because it knows what's coming next. Obviously, me having a routine and getting on the same train every day doesn't make the world any safer. It doesn't make it any less random and hurtful and dangerous and terrifying, but my brain calms down and relaxes around it. That's what that routine does for us. It gets rid of that fight or flight that we feel sometimes. So you're not going to be able to get all of this every day, but that start, end, breaks, meals, and exercise can be really, really useful. Someone said privately, with our rail service, it always fills you with wonder that you did get there, especially if it was on time. Yeah, absolutely. Alison said, I've started new routines since working from home. I start earlier and end earlier and give more time with the kids. Also, a walk at lunch, no matter the weather, has really helped. Brilliant, because your brain knows what to expect then, right? Instead, if you wake up in the morning and work can be anything, it can hit you with anything that's going to throw at you. If you've got no structure in your day, you're not going to actually be flexible. You're just going to be wobbly. We want flexibility with strength. So we need some pylons in the day. We need some certainties in the day. You're not going to get all 5 of these every day. Don't judge yourself negatively over it, but just try and get a few of these in your diary every day. It'll really start to help your brain feel a bit more relaxed and comfortable with your surroundings. Oh yeah, I'm going to share my other slide that I share all the time at the moment. Watch out for these traps. These don't help us. It's very easy for us to get stuck in these negative thought patterns at the moment, worrying about things I can't control, ruminating. It's media and social media speculation. My favorite one at the moment, this unhealthy comparisons. I've spoken to you about it today. Just because your loss might not seem as significant numbers wise to someone else's doesn't mean you shouldn't care for yourself and you shouldn't grieve properly. Your loss is yours. Your experience is yours. Comparing yourself to someone else doesn't help. I mean, look what we've got, 267 people here. We're all different. We've all had a different experience throughout the pandemic. Yeah, at some points it's crossed over and we felt the same, but we've all had our own independent experience. So there's no way we compare ourselves to each other. And then just watch out if you're getting caught up in that self-neglect or withdrawing, losing your independence. Use these things as bits of information. If I notice that I'm withdrawing, that's a sign to me that it's time to draw back in, reach out to people, schedule some calls with friends and family and loved ones. Really, really useful. Sarah saying, I've been supported in working from home on a flexible basis with the NHS, and this has helped me on maintaining my mental and physical health. Yeah, really good. Someone's saying in the chat, being close to the Almighty is the #1 source for them of strength and patience. So they use their faith to find that strength and patience they need. They've lost their only brother recently, and the best way for them at the moment is to focus on looking after their children, getting to know them as a friend, not as an uncle, and to get closer to them and aiming to make sure they succeed in their lives so that my brother would have been proud. My brother lives on through the memories and his children. Death is not an end in itself and should not be viewed as such. It's a very beautiful way of being able to see it. I can see that your faith really helps you there. Someone else saying, you get to see what you learn and your seasons you go through. And it's encouraging to realize that bad times do end, even when at the time it feels like they never will. Oh, you're talking about journaling there, I think. Yeah, it can be really useful for that reflection. So, tools and tips for well-being. First and foremost, take your break. That restful activity that suits you the most. And if you can, get it outside. I know some countries I'm talking to are on complete lockdown. Some countries have an MCO in place. Luckily here in the UK, we're allowed to get outside and use a bit more of that outside space. And it really strikes me, it hurts me emotionally. I was speaking to a group of staff in Malaysia today. They're in a complete movement control order and they can't go outside of their apartments. Makes me feel really lucky what I can do, where I can go. But remember that comparison, I can get stuck in that being really unhealthy at the moment. Someone here saying privately, in Manila, kids are still not allowed to go out. So the routine of my kids was greatly affected. Yeah. As a parent, I should be more creative every day so they can still enjoy their day even without going out. Yeah, but also give yourself a break. You're not a magician. You're not going to be able to come up with new exciting things for your kids to do every single day. That's absolutely fine. The pandemic has taken away a lot of your options for entertaining your children, especially if they're making them stuck inside. I can't imagine anywhere from me being 2 years old to me being 32 years old where me being stuck inside would have been an okay thing. I can't imagine I'd have handled that very well. So yeah, make sure you're taking a good break. Keep learning to stay creative. This consistent learning is really good for our flexibility in our mind, elasticity. It improves our self-esteem, and it's been shown to prevent depression. Just picking up new little tools and tips, little things that you can do. Someone here said privately, how about humor? You are so mighty serious. Oh, well, I think grief, loss, and acceptance deserves to be a serious topic. And also, I'm not very good at jokes, especially when it comes to jokes about grief, loss, and acceptance. If you've got any, though, feel free to send them to me in chat and I'll read them out. But this gives us hope and purpose, being able to learn. Makes us feel much, much better. And then my favorite topic at the moment, kindness and compassion. Caring for myself is not self-indulgence, it is self-preservation. And that's an act of political warfare. It's just a beautiful thought to remind myself that there is nothing that can go well from me not looking after myself. Any of this wallowing that I want to do, any of this escapism that I want to find, fine, that's okay for a little bit. But at the end of the day, I need to be kind and compassionate to myself. Kindness to other people, we're pretty good at as human beings. We're pretty built for that, fortunately. That's kind of how we're designed. But this kindness to ourselves can be so, so hard. Because it involves being honest, acknowledging what we're not getting, and then treating ourselves with kindness to find the things that we need. It's an absolute antidote to fear. And remember that lack of control, that powerlessness. If I can listen to myself and quite genuinely feel myself and give myself a hug, I can really help that powerlessness feeling. I always do it. I put my hands on here and I think, what is it I need today? I did this yesterday. I had a lot of presentations to do yesterday and I was a bit stuck. So I spoke to some of my colleagues in the morning and asked them to do some of my work for me, and they did very gratefully and very kindly and very happily. But I wouldn't have shipped that work out to someone if I'd not checked in with myself and tried to work out what I needed. I did read your joke. I'm not going to read it out just in case anyone's lost someone recently to that way of, yeah, it could be a little bit insensitive, but I find that really funny. Thank you. Sleep has a massive impact on resilience. Really important. Again, if you've been to any of my presentations, you will see this slide. I'm never going to change it. Electronic sundowns are a really important one at the moment. The way that we're connecting with other people is through these devices, but we also need to take a little bit of a rest from them. So if we can just get 1 hour away from it before bedtime, we can do that checking in with our needs. And the other one I love is that learning how to breathe optimally. Like I said, I'll send around a copy of this presentation to everyone that's here. So you can go and have a look through these in more detail. But let me know in the chat if any of these stand out to you, or if you've got any questions about sleep. I'd love to hear if anyone's particularly struggling with sleep and we can have a little talk about it. Someone's saying, listen and dance to the song Happy by Pharrell Williams helps them. That's really good. Someone else saying privately, if you have to choose between being right or being kind, always choose to be kind. And that includes being kind to yourself. That's beautiful. Someone else being honest privately saying, my kindness to others has dipped though when my tank is full. Also been working from home for a year has strained relationships. Absolutely. And this is why I mentioned that kindness to others and kindness to ourselves. We need to work a little bit harder of it. Just Jerome says, sleep. I only sleep 2 to 3 hours a day. You need a bit more, mate. You need a bit more. 2 to 3 hours a day is not enough sleep. So have a look at some of these tips. Clive says 300 milligrams of caffeine. How many double espressos is that? Probably 1.5 double espressos, unfortunately, Clive. Sarah says, what do you mean by white noise? So white noise is just a machine that produces some background noise, and that can make it really comfortable for us trying to get to sleep, especially if we're a light sleeper. You can find lots of free apps online on the App Store about it. There's one called Sleep Sounds that I find quite useful. Someone else saying, I'm sleeping mostly only 2 hours, then I wake up. Sometimes I can go back to sleep and sometimes not. So a big recommendation for those of you waking up in the night, make sure there's no clocks facing your bed. If you wake up in the middle of the night, and this is number 5 here, if you wake up in the middle of the night and you see the time, it will take you about an hour to fall asleep. If you don't see the time, it will take you about 5 minutes. So make sure these phones are charging over the other side of the room, not right next to your bed, because what happens if you check the time using this, you press that button, you see the time, but you also see messages, notifications, news alerts, emails that you've missed from work. I'm even looking at it now. Terrible. Bad idea. My concentration is gone. But imagine if that was the middle of the night. My brain starts waking up, starts wondering how many hours of sleep I've got left, starts panicking maybe. Connie says, Patrick, sorry, says, white noise sounds like shh. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, comes from air conditioning engines. If you find yourself sleeping really well when you're on a plane or a train or in a car or something, then a white noise machine might help you sleep at home. Steph says, I use the deep sleep playlist on Spotify. I've never heard of that. I might give that a try. Someone else saying privately, I'm having such strange dreams. Very natural at the moment. We're all getting a spike in adrenaline and cortisol at the moment from the anxiety due to the pandemic, and that can really affect our sleep and our dreams. Yeah. Someone says privately, I have difficulty with number 4, electronic sundown, because I usually check social media or watch on my phone before going to bed, because it's my only time to check my phone. This is because the whole day I'm working and taking care of the kids in the house. Okay, so you might just need to come up with a bit of structure around it. That's all. You know, an hour is best practice, but maybe you can just get half an hour of switching it off before bed. Absolutely fine. Someone's saying, same, I wake up 3 or 4 times in the night, so I can't sleep anymore. That's why I only sleep 2 or 3 hours a day, but it's mostly fine for me. It's okay, but long term, 2 to 3 hours a day is sleep deprivation, and that can really cause lots of difficulties with us physically. It can really increase the chance of heart difficulties. So if you're really having a struggle sleeping, try and speak to someone about it. Sleep experts are really a good place to speak about. Oh, a lot of people saying they've got to leave. We're nearly at the end of the presentation, then we'll have time for questions and answers. Just a reminder for those of you that are subscribers to CiC, go to wellonline.co.uk. That's the website where you'll find all your details. If you don't have your login information for that, speak to your organisation, speak to your HR department, or just give us a call at CiC and we'll let you know what it is. You can always email us at any time as well, assist@cicwellbeing.com. Cool. We've got, I don't know why I always have this slide. I'm just going to stop the recording now. So for those of you watching on YouTube, goodbye and thank you very much. And we're just going to have a bit of an open Q&A that isn't recorded for those that are here live.